I think where it might evolve, though, if we acquire new capabilities from it, and if somehow it gets even smarter, how would you deploy it in a bank? It could be, I have a theory around you might have a bank that will be sort of self-healing. So let's say you have an API that you use for some kind of open banking thing and the API changed. This AI might like rewrite the API so that it's up to date, or it could see a core system in trouble and it would do some corrective actions semi-autonomously, or it could say, I think this is a problem.
Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Efi Pylarinou, and today I have the pleasure to have with us Daragh Morrissey, who is the Director of Artificial Intelligence for Financial Services Worldwide for Microsoft. Let me welcome you, Daragh, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on, Effie.
I mean, this is a hot topic, right? Because of generative AI that's been around for so long, especially in financial services, suddenly has become, the hot topic. I don't know. I don't go anymore to happy hours. It's not a Swiss thing here like it was when I was working on Wall Street. But I can imagine at the bars, maybe in Ireland too, they're talking about generative AI. Is that true?
Yeah, well, it's true, and I talk to my family about it, my friends about it. They ask me a lot of stuff, and I'm Irish and I love talking, so this could be a very long recording.
So you want to tell us briefly about
So,
yourself, about your journey, especially in artificial intelligence,
yeah.
and then of course we'll get the opportunity to dive into more specifics.
Yeah, and anytime I kind of reflect on this, I realize that I'm very, very lucky to land where I did actually. I've been working with Microsoft for about 16 years. 8 of those, I was in Ireland working with the banks there, and this role came up in Seattle in Redmond at Microsoft, and I sort of went for it for fun, if I'm honest. I didn't think I'd get really anywhere near it because of where I was coming from, but they saw something in me I didn't see in myself, and they hired me. Quite funny, actually. I didn't really tell my family about it. I kind of got the offer on a Friday, and they said you'll have to move here. You have to move over from Ireland to Seattle. And I I kind of gave my wife a glass of wine that night, and I said, I have a great offer here, and what do you think? And we sort of said, look, let's do it. There was very little downside to doing it. I said we'll go for 2 years, and 8 years later, we're still here. My kids had Irish accents and now they have American accents. And I think the journey with AI has been very interesting. I mean, I worked with it pre-chat GPT. I've been working with it for about 4 or 5 years now, more on the predictive AI side. And actually, I struggled a bit with it. I felt sometimes like I was pushing a rock uphill because the use cases were very specific to different parts of our customers, specific to different parts of a bank. And even pre-November, I was thinking pre-November 2022, I was actually thinking of moving out of it, because my boss's boss was asking me, what's the killer use case for this? And I said, I can't tell you. It depends on who I talk to in a bank. What's the killer use case for them? So it was incredible what happened then. Since then, it's been incredible. And also, I reflect on I was the only one doing AI in my team, and now in my team of about 80, there's about all of them are doing AI. So it's really funny to wake up one day and seeing everyone else in your team doing the same thing as you. It's really, really funny, really exciting though, really, and really great.
Yeah, we are living in exciting times.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I ask questions or discuss about financial services, I also realize that that's an umbrella term too. There's so many areas that are very different, in banking, retail banking, corporate banking, and then you go to capital markets, and there's so many areas there, wealth management, the sell
Yeah.
side, buy side, it's crazy. Let's start from, of course, generative AI, because that's all the rave. What are you seeing from your clients in terms of where are they starting to either deploy or look to deploy? Is it more customer service, employee augmentation? Is it more, contact centers in retail banks, market research in capital markets? Give us an idea, a sense.
Yeah, sure. So I'm very lucky in my job. I get to see all of the innovation happening across the world and across all of those verticals that you mentioned. It is a very complex vertical. There's like three verticals in each of banking, insurance, and capital markets at least. So I think where most of my customers started in the really early days was they had used cognitive services from us to do things like forms recognition. Now with generative AI, the first thing we saw was developers using it. We had one Wall Street bank. They were using it pre-chat GPT to help them write code faster. And that use case is the most advanced, if you like, in terms of value realization. So if you want to look into the future, I would look at what we're doing with developers. And that use case itself has evolved quite a bit from where it started, which was just, creating new code. We have all kinds of amazing things now happening with, understanding legacy code, being able to document it, being able to explain it. And again, banks have a lot of this old code that was written a long time ago. Some of these languages, it's hard to get the skills for them. So, you can't actually even convert them from one language to another. We're doing that in our own products. I think where banks then started was when if I look back to sort of December 2022 and January, the first thing we saw was that the contact center was one of the first use cases, understanding the conversation with a customer, summarizing it, transcribing it, measuring the sentiment. And then, people started building knowledge bases. People were using ChatGPT and say, why can't I use this in the bank? So a lot of banks were building knowledge bases around their product information. And we see great opportunities for advisory roles as well, helping people get prepared for meetings. What I would say about the waves of sort of adoption is most banks have started inside their four walls first, which is a very safe thing to do, very sensible thing to do. And then I think what we're starting to see now is more engagement directly with customers using this tech. The vertical that's kind of racing ahead with bringing it to their clients is capital markets. So we have a lot of market data providers putting co-pilots in front of their research data, like Morningstar, Moody's. We're working with all of these companies just to help people make sense of all of that unstructured and numerical data, with generative AI.
Yeah, Mo from Morningstar, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Mo the robot and so on. And the
Yeah.
truth is that capital markets have such a breadth of information that is out there that humans can use help to
Yeah.
sort of understand it. Let's go, Daragh, a bit behind the scenes to understand how are you helping, or what is needed to prepare to deploy these generative AI processes? And are these preparations or transformations similar or different than what was needed and is needed for what we call traditional AI? Because, I mean, a lot of financial services are still on that journey. Some are very behind. So give us a sense.
Yeah, I think when I compare the two types of AI, they're very different in how they're built and how you have control over them. So when I think about predictive AI, you have control over the training data that you use for your model. Let's say you're doing something like next best action, you have all of your customer interactions that you can train on or you can analyze and other events that are happening. So you have full control over the model, which means that you can do things with that data from an explainability perspective that are easy. We have tools to help you find biases in data. So if you're building a credit scoring model of some kind, that's one that you need to be really careful about in terms of looking at biases in the data that's there. So yeah, I think predictive AI is really, really good still as well. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be, it's just the problem with it was a little bit inaccessible in terms of the skills needed to do it. We had banks that were spending a lot of time, a lot of money on hiring really advanced data scientists, and data scientists working with predictive AI are pretty amazing people. The really high end ones can, get the data, build the model, train it, and then tell the story about it. And what we found is the more sustainable thing for a bank to do is to break that role into different people across different people and create like a value chain inside the organization. And we have lots of tools in Microsoft to make this easier as well. We can actually we can point it at your data and it will actually recommend a model and it will build a visualization as well. I think with generative AI, what was really what was really eye-opening to me was how accessible it was. People suddenly had access to a supercomputer. I pay for ChatGPT myself. It's like $20 a month, but I'm using the biggest supercomputer in the world. And what's happened there is that the model is already built. It's already pre-built. And that's why they call it pre-trained, the general pre-trained model. And this means, though, that you can use it really quickly and it's more accessible. We even saw that in the early days last year where we had some of our sales teams actually building POCs with our customers directly because it's an easier thing to stand up. The kind of skills that you need to work on are more around, how do you build the prompts and how do you manage your prompts and things like that, the inputs to the model and the outputs. So I think generative AI is really exciting. There's some things that it can't do. Like everyone thinks it can do everything, and it's really great at accelerating productivity. I think, summarizing something, reasoning over data, and generating a draft of some kind. And I think that's where the difference is. And when I talk to customers about the two types of I used to spend a lot of time explaining what predictive AI could do. And with generative AI, they're walking into the room knowing exactly what they want to use it for. It's a much more interesting conversation actually, because it's now about how do we scale this? How do we deploy it?
It's natural language, right? So easier to experiment. So am I hearing this correctly, that generative AI is not going to eat into traditional AI?
It's not going to. They actually work really well together in certain scenarios. So what I would say is if you're looking to do something real time or something that needs sophisticated modeling and you need full control over the data, I would use traditional AI. So where generative AI is what banks are kind of using it for are very risk proportionate scenarios. So I'll give you an example. When you ask ChatGPT what can I use generative AI for, it actually gives you a ton of use cases that are they're BS, to put it politely. They're actually, it's looking back in its training data, seeing traditional predictive AI and saying that you can use them with generative AI. So it's in capital markets, it will say things like trading and stress testing, and it can't do those things out of the box. It can't add up to numbers. To be frank, it knows one and one is two because it saw it somewhere. Now it's getting better, but what you can do with it though is use a plugin of some kind to go out and use a calculator and do it, or it can write the calculator itself. But there's the thing is it's a generative AI is designed around engagement and it's designed around giving you the answers that you want to hear. So sometimes it does get things wrong, and that's why it's essential to have human supervision of the outputs. And we've kind of framed that through the co-pilot concept, which is, I think, really, really smart. It's there to help you. It's not there to take your job. And it's help you accelerate what you're doing or help you get started, basically.
So you believe that different combinations of traditional AI and generative AI can really work very well, instead of, as you said, imagining that, for example, stock markets are going to be run by generative AI and, those types of hallucinations, if you want, human hallucinations.
Yeah, one good use case now where they come together is there's two actually. There's fraud. So, anti-money laundering has been done by predictive AI for a long time. Now, it's predictive AI is great at spotting anomalies and patterns and things. And now what you can do though is have generative AI have a conversation with the data. So it's really good at looking at patterns in data and telling you the story of the data. And same for like advisors. You could use generative AI to help generate a small briefing prep document of some kind before you meet a client. And in that briefing, there might be some kind of recommendation next or some kind of portfolio optimization that you can recommend to a client. And again, that could be predictive AI. So I think both of them are going to be they're here to stay. I think generative AI though it might evolve to the point where it can start doing those things. At the moment, it's just a bit too new. And I've learned not to be too absolute about these things, but right now it's still, somebody said to me once, treat it like a super smart intern, or a group of interns. And I was an intern myself. I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but you sort of have to watch what they're doing. I was at I was at a presentation this week where somebody used the analogy and they said, you wouldn't have an intern sign off $100 million deal or something like that. That goes up to a chief financial officer who sort of does the due diligence and supervision around it. And it's the same with this. You sort of have to, give them a job, comes back, and then just check it, and then you might have to tell them to, can you just do it this way? And it's the same analogy, I think.
You have to be a domain expert when you're using it seriously for something. I mean, we all
Yeah.
use it, and we all have several examples where we understand that if we didn't know what our domain, we would be easily led in to believe that this is the truth. And, even if sometimes they point these LLMs to the source where they found the information, even those sources are wrong or they don't have the information. So one has to understand the context of using these. You talk a lot about the democratization. That's a game changer. And you mentioned the fact that it's because with generative AI, you don't need to move data around. So does that really mean that effectively you're circumventing data silos within at least the organization? We're talking here financial services, we're regulated within financial services in the different departments. Is that so? How would that work from a data perspective?
Yeah, so the way it works, so I should clarify, when I say you don't need to move data around, it was more about these models are pre-trained, so they've already been trained on some other data, and again, with a predictive model, you have to bring the data to it. Now, what we do with generative AI though is we work with your data, so you don't need to necessarily put your data into the model. So what we do is we build up a graph of your data, a map of your data, and brand everything that you ask the large language model in your data. So the great thing about this is for a bank is we have a service called Azure OpenAI service where you get your own sort of copy of the model, but nothing that you use with the model goes out to OpenAI. It just stays, the inputs and the outputs stay inside your four walls. The model itself is stateless. Anything that you do doesn't train it in any way. And that's the most compliant way to do this. And we take it very seriously. It's in all of our products that we have where your data is your data, even in the Office products that we have. Office 365 Copilot, if you ask it, write this presentation from this document, all that data is, again, inside your four walls, essentially.
Yes, but does that mean that if a bank is, let's call it a digital lagger, right, in terms of their overall transformation, cloud, data architecture, and so on, it does need to do a lot of preparatory work for this to be deployed, right?
Now, one of the things that we announced this week at Build was a new service called Fabric, and I don't want to make this a sales pitch or anything, but essentially what we can do is work with the data where it is. So we have this SaaS data service now called Fabric, where you can mirror the data or have shortcuts to the data, and you don't need to move the data from where it is. It could be on another cloud provider to us. It could be in your data center somewhere. It could be in your CRM system. And what we can do is create this thing called, we call it a one lake, but you can do AI across all that stuff, or we can help you do it across your documents if they're in SharePoint. So it's in the early days of AI, what banks went through was, they had data that was in SQL databases, data warehouses, data lakes, you name it, and everyone always kind of tried to get it into one place, which was very difficult and something of a unicorn actually. So what we're doing with this service is to sort of say, stop the madness, leave your data where it is. We'll bring it to the analytics and the AI for you. And it's all kind of SaaS based, so it's very easy to use. And, we have also got accelerators around working with your documents and contact center and things like that. So what we're trying to do is help balance the cost of this. The cost of it's coming down all the time. I saw, that the cost of querying these models now. I think it's come down in price by 6 times or something this week. So we're trying to get to lower cost and more accuracy, and again, make this as easy as possible for banks to deploy. And we have a lot of banks now in production as well, which is great.
So are you seeing a mindset shift, a cultural shift? Because I guess of the threats and the opportunities that generative AI promises or has the potential. And as you said today, it has certain capabilities and a lot of shortcomings, but we do understand that technologies evolve, and this one is evolving fast. So are you seeing sort of some type of acceleration, not maybe as much as we saw in COVID, but of that order?
Oh, yeah. And I think it's real. The one thing I'd say is with predictive AI, it was very hard to sell the benefits of it. The use case and the values the value from the use cases were very specific to different parts of a bank. So the fraud department might like a fraud detection AI, and the customer service department might like the contact center stuff. And what's exciting about generative AI is you can actually build it and the whole bank can use it, which is amazing. One of the things that AXA, the insurance company, did, they started off with like a very small knowledge base around their corporate functions, and then they extended it to the whole company. So they called it AXA GPT, I think. And again, that's a great example of everyone in the company being able to build it once and have everyone use it, which is really exciting to me. I think the other thing that's happening is when ChatGPT came out, people started using it, and we have this concept of shadow GPT, just like we had with cloud and mobile and bring your own device. It's the same thing happening again. So what banks had to do was block it, and if you block it, you have to give them something else. So we did it. We also had a survey last week where we found out that like 70% of any organization has used generative AI at least once or twice in the last year. So what's happening is there's people using it from the ground up, and then the CEOs at the top are really excited about it. CEOs see the opportunity here to drive a ton of efficiency, drive a ton of productivity, employee engagement, and things like that. And those two things are sort of coming together. And in the middle, what's happening is the bank's technology functions and the business functions are coming together as well. So the real power of this tech is not being able to write a PowerPoint from natural language to me. It's about how it's bringing people together. I do executive briefings all the time, and a couple of years ago, I'd have a bank that would come in. The two different sets of the bank would come in on different planes, or we'd have to put them in separate meetings because they weren't talking to each other at all. And now, because the CEO wants it, because the people on the ground want it, it's actually, you're sort of pushing an open door with this. I think people do need to be trained. There is an adoption curve that's going to have to happen here. I'm not saying it's necessarily an easy thing, but when I look at previous sort of technology waves, this is very different. Like, it's not, even a bank deciding to go to the cloud was a decision that you had to really think about carefully. What was the risks of doing this? And you could actually stay in your data center for a couple of years. Now with this technology, you don't really have a choice. You have to do it. Kids are using it. They're going to come into the workforce. My own kid uses it every day as a tutor. So if she goes to Bank of Efi in 5 years' time looking for a job, and you don't give her AI, she will just go somewhere else where she can use AI to do her job. So I sort of say to banks is, don't overthink this. Like, use the out-of-the-box AI that we have in Office and give it to your developers, and then focus on your custom use cases.
Yeah. So there is consensus, is what you're finding within the organizations, which we haven't seen before. As you said, we didn't see it with cloud. We didn't see it with other types of technologies in financial services, right?
Yeah.
And this is really remarkable what has happened, and very encouraging, because obviously that at the end of the day, it's people's attitudes, people's creativity, if you want, to see how to use these for their own personal use, for their own job, for their teams, and come up with new ideas, because there's definitely a lot of room to come up with different creative ways how to leverage these technologies and not just plain vanilla cost cutting or efficiencies. We haven't even touched new business models, and that definitely will come.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually got no idea what they look like either. I have a slide that I sometimes will show where I'll show the sort of three waves of this, inside your organization, taking it to your customer, and then what's going to happen next. Because I actually don't know what's going to happen next with this. I'm being really transparent. I've learned not to be too absolute. I think where it might evolve though is, again, if we acquire new capabilities from it, and if somehow it gets even smarter, how would you deploy it in a bank? It could be, I have a theory around, you might have a bank that will be sort of self-healing. So let's say you have an API that you use for some kind of open banking thing, and the API changed. This AI might like rewrite the API so that it's up to date, or it could see a core system in trouble and it would do some corrective actions semi-autonomously, or it could say, I think this is a problem, here we do this, So the exciting thing for me though is being able to have a conversation with a bank. If we can really kind of talk to a bank in a natural way and kind of fix that, because at the moment it's very clunky, right? I think that a lot of the bots that the banks use are they're quite dumb. They know about two things and then they bounce it out to a contact center or website. But if they can really get smarter with that, I think that's where the opportunities.
Yeah. And instead of having people using AI companions of general nature and disclosing their financial issues and worries and frustrations to them, banks should be able to listen to those and handle those in a natural way, like we are talking to each other, empathy, and with the ability to not say, okay, this is not in my department, let me put you on hold and switch you to the other department. The other important aspect that you mentioned, Daragh, is open banking and open finance, which is happening. We are seeing ecosystems being built and different business models, and clearly their generative AI could be of a lot of help in making those ecosystems smarter and reducing the risks of what we are building now with the technology stacks, but not being able to monitor the businesses across those value chains. And we are seeing these problems in banking, and also doing all this in a very compliant way, instead of waiting for a disaster to happen to start blaming who was responsible at the bottom of the tech stack for the disaster that happened. The potential is there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm excited by the opportunities for more inclusion. Now it's a very first world problem, but when I came to the US, I couldn't buy a toaster with a credit card. I had no credit score. At the same time, they would give me a mortgage, which was kind of bonkers. And I'm not saying I'm saying that I managed to get on board with a credit union here very quickly. But what I think is the way that we score credit, even, I think is quite all wrong in the US. If I'm honest, I think it's sort of, I thought it was rewarding you for paying your bills on time, but it seems to reward you for getting more credit cards and things like that. I think there's a role here for AI with more data to extend financial access to people that at the moment can't, and help them find their way out of debt as well. So I think there's something here that I think is going to be a lot of people focus on where it can go wrong as well, which is okay. We do have to plan for that. We have a ton of responsible AI work going on at Microsoft, but I think there's great opportunities with this and for new jobs to be created as well. I think at the moment, banks are sort of, they treated analytics and AI, it was kind of off to the side, I think, a lot. And now banks are bringing it front and center. And that means that you're going to have to create a value chain inside the organization around the data, training it, testing it, making sure it's working. And I think these jobs can be done by, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I can do some of this stuff now because I did some training. But I think there's new jobs going to be created. A lot of what Gen AI does is it sort of eliminates tasks. It doesn't eliminate jobs at the moment. And I believe that it's going to be a force for good.
Yeah, and on the optimistic side, it is showing that we are all potentially upskillable, right? We can be upskilled from where we are and beyond taboos like ageism and those types of ideas. We can be. And generative AI has helped us a lot because it is based on natural language and it's much more intuitive for everybody. But of course, everybody needs some guidance. And I think that still not a lot of people have used it enough to see how much more they can discover. Any search is changing, the internet is changing, the interfaces, more natural language, probably more voice. Everything is changing in this world. Daragh, we could be talking for a long time. I want to thank you for this wonderful conversation. Your last words of wisdom around AI, generative AI, financial services. We in financial services have been with AI for a long time, and a lot of reports are out there that are optimistic about how they will be leveraged. What is your sentiment and what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think the last thing I'd say is don't overthink this if you're a bank. What I do see some banks doing, not all of them, is kind of analyzing this and academically studying it and getting to even very precise business cases around it. Excuse me. What I would say is just get started. Like, it's like learning to drive. You don't learn to drive reading a book. When I learned to drive, my dad took me to the local car park and I drove very slowly. And then over time, I got to go on the highway, and it's the same with this.
Yeah, I think the bicycle, Daragh, is a better example. Because you can study the mechanics of the bicycle, but that wobbling, even if they hold you, right? You have to do it on your own to feel it and go on smooth roads, go on off-road, take a turn and so on to see really what it's all about, right?
Yeah. So it's Satya, our CEO, said once, you don't get fit watching other people go to the gym. That's it. You need to get organizationally fit with this stuff. And it's really exciting. Like, I think I would embrace it. You've really got two choices in life. When these things happen, you can sort of bury your head in the sand. But it's actually, I'd argue that it's already happened. It's actually already happened. And now, it's up to you to kind of ride the wave and do it in a very safe way. And I think banks are doing it incredibly smart. They're really risk proportionate. They're not doing anything silly with it, at all. So I think the opportunities here, if we can get to that great customer experience where I can just talk to the bank, we have contact center agents that can actually really answer questions really quickly. That's another thing that I'm seeing, even in that use case. We're seeing churn in those contact centers go down. People are actually able to do the job now, and they're even starting to sell more as opposed to doing basic servicing. So I think it's really exciting.
Thank you, Daragh. We'll be in touch because things change so fast. So I'm sure in a couple of months we'll have more insights. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Efi. Great chatting to you today.